that killed 5 people in the space of 3 days. Let's take a look at that report.
A stitch in time saves 9, they say, and that was exactly what transpired here.
Well, it's a mad rush here in Ruiru town as residents from this 5-story building behind me are rushing to remove their belongings after what we understand cracks developing right inside the basement of the building. And so what we're going to do is try and get inside the building to see how bad the situation is.
There's cracks on the building's walls, evident that the situation was a ticking time bomb. Tenants in this building, concerned about the fast deterioration of a building they say had already shown early danger signs.
Nimeishi hapa kutoka last year December. So hii nyumba imekuwa hapo kwa mwisho, hapo kwenye kuna shop kumekuwa kukicrack. So watu wamekuwa wakipuuza tu. So leo ndio imekuwa serious, jana jioni. So leo asubuhi venye nilikuwa natoka nikienda job nikapata hiyo crack imecrack kabisa.
Today morning we found a big crack on one side of the pillars. We called the landlord. Landlord was here in the morning. He assured us that he will take the required measurement. But after 1 hour we got a call from police officers, that we need to start vacating the premises fast. We rushed from Nairobi, we stay in Nairobi, we rushed here. While we started removing, we had removed a little bit, like 1 lorry of the goods.
Kiambu Governor Kimani Wamatangi, who was present at the scene, ordered evacuation of the building as well as adjacent apartment blocks.
Muondoke nje, watu wako kwenye nyumba. Kwenye dakika 45 tunataka kila mtu awe ameondoka. Hilo nyumba mnaona ni hatari kukua ndani.
The building houses shops on the ground floor as well as residential apartments.
Tumekuja tumekagua, tumeona kweli hii nyumba ni hatari sana mahali ilipo saa hizi. Haiwezi kukaliwa tena. Kwa vile columns zake zote ambazo zinafaa kuwa zinashikilia ile nyumba zime crack zote, ziko na nyufa kubwa ambazo zinaonesha ya kwamba hiyo nyumba haiwezi kusimama kwa muda mrefu ikiwa vile ilivyo.
The evacuation has been implemented as a precautionary measure in light of the rising number of building disasters, 2 of which happened in the last 1 week alone.
Tulikuwa tushapanga mkutano na waziri ambaye amepewa hii shughuli ya kusimamia ardhi na hali ya manyumba. Na tulikuwa tumepanga huo mpango tuketi kesho saa 7 pamoja na governor wa Nairobi. Kwa vile Nairobi hii shida bado ipo, ndio tuulizane solution ni gani.
Following the collapse of the Ruaka building on Thursday, the Kiambu governor disbanded the technical committee in charge of approving building applications and inspecting building construction, warning of dire consequences.
We shall go around the county and inspect every building with the new team that I have put in place. We will ensure that every building that is not compliant will be subjected to only 2 tests. Can it be rectified? If so, that will have to be done to the satisfaction of the experts. If not, it will be brought down.
Zainab Ismail, NTV.
Now, as the world commemorated the World Day of Road Crash Victims yesterday, different stakeholders have called for collective responsibility and ensuring reduction of road carnage. Well, recent statistics indicate that nearly 4,000 people have died since January this year, a 5% increase compared to the same period in 2021. Here's NTV's Ruth Sarmoi with more.
Victor Rono is grateful to be alive after surviving a road crash along the busy Nairobi-Mombasa highway in 2013. However, that accident left him disabled.
Nilivunjika kabisa hata mpaka nika lose hope.
Instrumental stakeholder in our...
The National Transport and Safety Authority, NTSA, reports that a total of 3,924 people have died since January this year, a 5.11% increase from the same period in 2021. NTSA further states that pedestrians still account for the highest number of casualties at 1,413, followed by motorcyclists at 1,046. Kenya loses 310 billion shillings from such accidents.
90% of these incidents are behavior related. That is speeding, reckless driving, dangerous overtaking, drink driving, drink walking, drink riding, motorists using unfamiliar roads during weekends and lack of use of helmets, and are therefore preventable. The
most recent accident to be reported occurred Saturday afternoon at Josa area along the Wundanyi-Mwatate Road in the county of Taita Taveta, where 4 people lost their lives. Many victims of road crashes find it hard to accept themselves following the life-altering accidents they encounter. And while some may live with visible scars, many live with untold traumas.
Na kitu ingine hata wakati nililose hope, mimi ilichukua muda mimi kujikubali kama mtu disable, ilichukua muda sana.
Yule hata nilikuwa nimebeba alikufa hapo. Sasa mimi nikabaki kasabai na watoto nategemea, sina mwingine, kuna usaidizi yote niko naye kukaa tu.
Residents living within the infamous Salga black spot along the Nakuru-Eldoret highway called on the government to build a hospital to respond to accident victims faster.
Kama hiyo hospitali ingekuwa hapo ingesaidia watu wengi. Tunaomba serikali. Shamba iko kila kitu huko.
Kenyans have been urged to observe road regulations as the festive season draws nearer.
Ambaye unaona kabisa imejaa. Mtu anakuambia kalia sosa utafika hapa karibu. Hiyo kitu by the way ningependa tu kuambia hiyo kitu si mzuri.
Traffic offenses should now be raised to the same level as criminal offenses.
We have a responsibility to use our roads well. Each one of us is important and no one should lose life for no reason or reckless driving.
The government is calling for collective responsibility in reducing accidents. Ruth Sarmoi, NTV, Nakuru.
Well, the family of 31-year-old Naneo Muthoni Muturi, who was brutally murdered in Lang'ata last week, are pleading for justice as they prepare to bury her on Tuesday. The prime suspect, ex-boyfriend Thomas Mbugua Muthe, is currently at the Lang'ata police station awaiting to be arraigned today. Now, friends and family gathered at a PCA church in Lang'ata to celebrate the life of Naneo. Naneo was found dead at her boyfriend's home in Onyonka Estate on Monday morning after the family's attempts to reach her were unsuccessful. The suspect was apprehended at the Kenya-Uganda border in Malaba before being brought back to Nairobi. Naneo's family is hoping to find justice.
Well, as a family, we're just expecting justice to happen. You will just let justice prevail at the end of the day. But we are glad at least he is caught. Now it's in the hands of the law. Let the law take its course. As a family, we are taking a day at a time. Clearly, it's a deep loss. It's a very deep loss. I mean, it's irreplaceable. But also at the end of the day, that is God's plan. So just one day at a time.
Well, Azimio la Umoja One Kenya party leader Raila Odinga has called for a meeting of the outfit's constituent parties to forestall a looming fallout emanating from remarks attributed to members of the Jubilee Party. Odinga has dismissed the coalition party's troubles as a storm in a teacup. However, ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna now says it is time the coalition reviewed each party's contribution to Azimio's loss in the August polls in a bid to prepare for the 2027 general election better. NTV senior political affairs reporter Kennedy Mureithi explains.
There are concerns over unity at the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition political party, with some constituent parties threatening to leave and chart a different path. A newspaper headline in one of the local dailies has caused serious consternation within Azimio. NTV understands the Jubilee Party is threatening to bolt. The reported threats to leave have left the Orange Democratic Movement, ODM, seething with anger.
I saw the headlines yesterday quoting Jeremiah Kioni, the SG of Jubilee, saying that they are done with Raila, that they paid whatever debt they owes. So for us, even in ODM, I can tell you, Ken, that within ODM, there is a vast silent majority who would want nothing but to have that conversation with our brothers and sisters in Jubilee, because we would want to have that discussion on everybody's role, what was promised and what was delivered.
Jubilee Party Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni and former Nyeri Town MP Ngonjiri Wambogo are said to be unhappy with the state of affairs.
Let them tell us if they have decided that they want to chart another path. That is also okay, because you understand that coalitions, like any relationship, they are based on your consent. You cannot be forced to be in a coalition that you feel is no longer useful for you.
ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna has called for an audit of each constituent party's performance in the August general election.
The agreement was that the Jubilee Party would help us get at least 40% of the vote in Mount Kenya. If you look at the registered number of voters in Mount Kenya of about 6 million, that means that Jeremiah Kioni and his party was supposed to deliver 2.4 million votes.
1.2 million votes. If you compare with what Raila had gotten there before, at least for those of us who are with them, they should show respect.
People were lying to Baba. People from Mount Kenya were lying to Baba about the actual situation on the ground. That in fact, we were being told we could get this 30% when they themselves, some of these people who are speaking, knew that even they themselves were going to lose.
The only reason why I'm not in Bunge is because of having stuck with Jubilee and having supported Raila. I mean, for those of us who are that loyal and have not even agreed to be enticed by any support or even on the floor by UDA, like others are showing. I mean, the person you have been loyal to should reciprocate.
They knew it, but they were lying to us. And then I hear them saying they are suffering because they supported Raila. No, they are suffering because they lied to Raila Odinga about the true situation on the ground in Mount Kenya.
Jubilee has documented its grievances with the Orange Party, accusing ODM of not being keen to accommodate them, especially on matters positions.
They are not going to be flower girls or flower boys of anybody.
We were not coerced to join ODM in Azimio. We joined willingly, and if they mistreat Jubilee members, we leave them willingly, because you have experienced firsthand the conmanship, the politics of deceit, and political banditry.
We are also announcing that very soon we'll be convening a BG, the parliamentary group of BG, of Jubilee, to discuss this and all other issues pertaining to the party's interest.
For us to remain in opposition, there is need for the parties in the opposition to respect one another.
The coalition's leader, Raila Odinga, however, says the fallout has been exaggerated as he calls for a meeting to sort out an impending break.
No, there's nothing in Azimio at all. It's a storm in a teacup, okay? So don't believe it. Azimio is as strong as it ever was.
The trouble in Azimio is an issue that we can overcome. Those are not issues that can cause us instability that we can't hold together.
It was never about Raila Odinga. Azimio is a movement that has brought several political parties together. They share certain ideology and a common vision, what Azimio want to do, and you saw our manifesto. So it is not about Raila.
Kennedy Muredi, NTV.
Now, for the first time in history, a UN climate summit has adopted a decision to set up a financing facility for loss and damage, which will essentially offer compensation to countries in the global south for losses incurred as a result of climate change. Well, developing countries have welcomed the decision, terming it the first step towards climate justice. NTV Science editor Zainab Wandati now reports on the happenings at COP27 as the summit closed.
It was the biggest ask at COP27. And as the days dragged on, it seemed impossible that the developing world would get its wish. But at 4:30 Sunday morning, more than 32 hours after the scheduled close of the climate summit, the president's gavel came down and the wish was granted.
My friends, we heard the calls and we responded. Today, here in Sharm el-Sheikh, we established the first ever dedicated fund for loss and damage, a fund that has been so long in the making.
Putting loss and damage on the agenda of the COP was one of Africa's priorities at the beginning of the summit, and although it made it into the agenda, discussions on it were not guaranteed. This broke the hearts of poor countries in attendance, but despite the heartbreak, they continue to push for compensation for the losses and damages they incur as a result of climate change.
We have struggled for 30 years on this path, and today in Sharm el-Sheikh, this journey has achieved its first positive milestone.
Millions around the globe can now sense a glimmer of hope that their suffering will finally be addressed swiftly and appropriately.
We are really pleased that the G77 plus China, the largest bloc of developing countries negotiating here, stood firm, stood united, and delivered this.
This is a very positive result from 1.3 billion Africans. Yes. Very, very exciting because for us, success in Egypt was going to be based on what we get from loss and damage.
Although COP27 took a decision to set up a fund for loss and damage, no discussions or decisions were made on where the money in the fund will come from or how the fund will be populated. And some delegates feel that even though the fund itself is a win, the language around it was weakened to exonerate wealthy nations from taking any kind of responsibility in causing the climate crisis in the first place.
It's primarily meant to actually help you to build an alternative livelihood system. Now, you can't do that without having the historic polluter, who of course climate change in the first place, actually assuming liability and compensating you for those harms.
The hard work begins next year to make sure that we know where the funding will come from, to make sure that we know where the structure of the fund will sit.
As Africa and the developing world celebrates this win, the European Union has expressed displeasure with the climate deal struck in Sharm el-Sheikh, saying it has fallen short of the aspirations of the Paris Agreement to contain global temperature rises.
The European Union came here to get strong language agreed, and we are disappointed we didn't achieve this. I strongly urge us all to roll up our sleeves and show to the world that the fight for ambition for a better future is not yet over.
The cover decision, known as the Sharm el-Sheikh Implementation Plan, also highlights that a global transformation to a low-carbon economy is expected to require investment of at least $6 trillion a year, and urged multinational investment banks to support climate-compatible development. But there's a feeling that the COP27 decisions have done little to address the root cause of climate change, such as fossil fuels. Africa says it would have preferred a decision to phase out fossil fuels.
In this text, we have been given reassurances that there is no room for backsliding. It gives the key political signals that indicate the phase down of all fossil fuels is happening.
COP27 is believed to be the second most well-attended COP after the Glasgow meeting, which had nearly 40,000 delegates, and COP27 had about 33,000, representing 194 countries. And for the first time, the Holy See attended as a party state and not as an observer state. Now, all these 194 countries in attendance delivered a package of 25 decisions, including a mitigation work program, which is intended to scale up mitigation activities. The next COP, COP28, will be in Dubai next year. Zainab Wandati, NTV, Nairobi.
Well, thank you, Zainab, for all those timely updates on exactly the resolutions at COP27 in Egypt. Well, time to look at what's in the news diary today. And President William Ruto is in the DRC ahead of a 3-day Korea state visit. The Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, is meeting a number of leaders on the drought mitigation appeal, and it is day 2 of the Lake Region Economic Bloc 10th Summit. And the SEA and CAM are also meeting on intellectual property rights, as well as the court's direction on the order halting PS's vetting. What is the way forward? And we'll be looking at that much deeper. Time to get to the dailies now. And we'll begin with the Daily Nation in a moment here. And all right, there you have it. So this is what we have on the very front page of the Daily Nation. And I'm not having this conversation alone. Of course, I'm joined by Nordin Kagai at this point, who's an advocate and political analyst. A very good morning. Karibu Sana. So this is what we have on the very front page. Storm over GMOs. Azimio leader Raila Odinga once planned to import GM maize halted, even as he challenges the government to make available scientific studies it relied on to lift ban on genetically modified organisms, and asking legislators to lead debate on the grave matter. That's on full pages 2 and 3. Look, we're going to get into this matter in just a moment, because I also want us to take a look at a report that was filed yesterday and then get to this issue. Quite a raging debate at this point. All right, so we'll get to that in a moment. But even away from that, also, we still actually do also have the Nandi Senator Samson Cherargei also making his views known and exactly what he feels about the issue, and talking to legislators from the Rift Valley region, who are also widely from maize-growing regions. Also then, we have this issue, Maina, I borrowed a tie to access House chambers for Iyala results. That is Maina's name. That's the Iyala who's just been appointed into the East African Legislative Assembly, Godfrey Mwangi Maina Karobia. Well, he talks about how his journey was, talking about where he was on Thursday when the election was happening. And he says he was just in Nairobi, walking around, doing his errands. Then having, missed out on the list of 5 names that were chosen at State House the previous day, he'd lost the most important support and backing, that of President William Ruto. But then he refused to give up, saying he has a spirit that never gives up. And that Wednesday evening, Maina thought about the next move just hours before the voting day. Although he convinced himself that he can still make it, a call from his mother that evening made him think twice. Now, in his first interview, of course, the mother told him that she read the names from the State House and that he was not among the names chosen. At that point, he says he thought he'd lost it. But in his first interview after the election, Maina recalls how he sauntered into the precincts of Parliament on Thursday when counting was underway, but could not access the Speaker's gallery because he did not have a tie. And there you go. I mean, so this is a young man, 28 years old, managed to get into quite a prestigious position, very contested, highly contested by, members of the political divide. I don't know what you make of this. And of course, the aftermath of the Iyala election, which is, well, some say threatening to create some splits and cracks within both coalitions.
Well, this is actually good news for Maina,
right.
Maina and for the youth at large,
Right.
And members of parliament did a good thing there. They did the thing, as we usually say. There was a list, and they went against the list. And it's good that the youth get a representative. Now we have Maina. Win is also 31 years. That is that is more or less good.
Right.
Because now at least there's a voice out there.
Yeah.
And I hope they actually go there and work and make sure that they make legislation that benefits Kenya and East Africa as a whole, and show that actually the youth have capacity, and which is brilliant. When I saw this news, I was very elated and happy. Yeah?
Right.
I know him personally, and I know he's a sharp guy.
He is
a sharp guy. So
right.
I really hope and pray that he proves those who doubted him wrong, and show that actually the youth can have a say. And what is best about it, if you look at that photo, you have leaders from different camps.
Right.
They were actually...
So that was interesting.
They were actually calling him Mtoto wa Mama. The female members of parliament embraced him as their son. And they were all over him, which was good, both from Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. And it was a good sight.
What do you make of how the election went, with, of course, how we expected that the names that were endorsed at State House the previous day would perhaps be the names that we would see getting in?
Well, Parliament was meant to be a conveyor belt if they were meant to follow those names that were given to them. But I see there was a lot of lobbying. And as he says also, he had foot soldiers in the house. When you read that story, you can see he didn't even have a tie. He had to borrow a tie.
Right.
What is the beauty about it is that people actually it was more or less like a campaign. And if you endeared yourself to the parliamentarians, then you end up getting elected. We saw Kanini, courtesy of Jubilee, he went through. We saw Winnie went through. And we also saw Shabal go through. So which is actually a good thing.
Right.
It's more or less about you and how you portray yourself. And I'm sure there was also some backing from the political elite.
Right.
One or another. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. And also joining us in studio right now for the first time on AM Live, Mheshimiwa John Njuguna, MP Kiamba. Karibu sana. A very good morning to you.
Thank you. Good
Quite
morning.
late, but we'll look at that. Okay. I'm joking. So we're looking at what's in the dailies, of course, and this is something of interest to us, and it is how the East Africa Legislative Assembly MP now, Godfrey Mwangi Maina Karobia, managed to get into that office. And interesting, I want to get your thoughts on the same, despite the fact that we saw there was jostling behind the scenes in State House the previous day. But the young man, 28-year-old, managed to carve himself that path to that position.
Yeah, I think it was unfortunate that his name didn't appear in the State House list.
Right.
But we managed to salvage him in the National Assembly.
Correct.
And he's a very young man. He's a hustler. So I think he was able to woo people from both political divide, both from Kenya Kwanza and Azimio Coalition as well.
So that was interesting.
Yeah. Right. And that shows that when it comes probably to defend one of us as a young people, especially all the young parliamentarians from both political sides, whether it's in Azimio, whether it's in Kenya Kwanza, we all agree that we must have a young person who is going to represent us, especially the Kenya Kwanza. At Yara. That's why he was able to garner a lot of votes. And it was just a misunderstanding between whatever happened. You know, it was a guided democracy. We probably wanted, but all among the 5 candidates that, you know, we were able to elect during the State House, it's only one who did not succeed, but all the other 4 were able to succeed at the National Assembly. So congratulations actually to my friend Maina Karobia. He's a young person. He's the son of a single mother like myself, and he was able to get support from both political sides of
well, we had that, you know, there has been talk that there was defiance by legislators, especially from the Mount Kenya region, in this decision. Is it true?
There was no defiance, actually, because if you look at exactly what happened at State House, apart from all the 5, apart from Maina Karobia, we were able to elect all the 4 candidates that we agreed on when we went to State House. So there was no defiance. It's only that we felt that this young man, probably there were people who were able to, you know, do their magic during State House when we were voting, and they were able to garner more votes than Maina Karobia. But when we retreated, we felt like it is not okay for us to let that young man just go like that. So able to negotiate a retrobit between the candidate from State House and Maina Karobia, and we agreed as a coalition that let us go and support Maina to represent us at the IARA, the East African Legislative Assembly.
Right.
So it was not defiant as per se, because apart from that, we were able to elect all the other 4 candidates, but we felt like if we don't give this young man a chance, probably whatever we say that we support the hustlers may not come out clearly, because he was the only hustler among the 5 candidates that was elected to go to the National Assembly. So we felt that we really need to revisit our decision from the State House and probably now come up with a better modality on how we are going to support. And it was negotiated actually between us, our friends in Kenya Kwanza Coalition, and the party position, so that at least we can all now go and back him, because if he was not backed by the Kenya Kwanza government or Kenya Kwanza MPs, he could not have garnered the kind of votes he did. So it was something that we sat down, we looked at the decision we made at the State House, and we felt like we need to revisit that decision and probably make sure that Maina Karobia is in the list.
Yes. Let me get thoughts from also joining us, Jarvis Bigambo, lawyer, political communication strategist, also governance expert. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.
What are your thoughts on this, the aftermath of the IALA results? It was interesting. We saw a bit of debate coming from that, saying that, you know, perhaps this election is going to set the coalitions on a different trajectory, both on the political divide.
Well, I would wear slightly different lenses. I wouldn't look at it in terms of the kind of tremors that would result into fractions within coalitions. But I would say that it was a signature approach to consensus building within by parliamentarians on issues that seem to bring a number of them together. And we know very well that beyond the issue of impressively so age and the regional aspect, I think that the issue of defiance may not really have taken center stage as it has been alluded to, and that's why I would rather put my argument or incline my argument on the issue of a silent consensus building on issues of interest. Now, Kenya Kwanza is a government that came into office or rode on the wave of hustler narrative, etc. That wave, as Mheshimiwa has spoken, it's an issue that maybe would have may have informed some of them to say that, like is also indicated, that coming from a not so advantaged background, having fought his way up, I think it provided an opportunity for him to actually feel that check of a hustler, a person that has worked his way up. But beyond that, I think it is quite impressive that a couple of young people, a new generation of leaders has populated that Yala list.
All right. But even with that, is it a political dumping ground for those who lose the polls?
Well,
because look, I mean, we have a number of names here. Some were proposed, managed to get through. Not Kanini Kega, Hassan Omar, Fatma Gedi. You have Jeremiah Kioni on that. But is it so? Regional Assembly is viewed as destination for political bigwigs to reward allies or dump those rejected
look at it as a West bin, political West bin. But I think in the past, such kind of perspective may have been afforded. But when you look at persons such as Maina Karobia, when you look at persons such as former Senator from Mombasa, Hassan Omar, being a firebrand politician and activist that he's been, it may bring in, maybe he may salt or he may pepper a bit of Kenya's representation at Yala. Because in the past, and a very germane question I would entertain, individuals that have represented Kenya at the East African Legislative Assembly, former, the current Senator Oburu Odinga, for example, who's a former Yala member. Is there an issue, or even, for example, Kalonzo Musyoka's son, Kennedy Musyoka, is there a particular issue that somebody can put a finger to for them having contributed of significant national importance or recognition? Now, a case in point, Kenya in the recent past had a tiff with Tanzania over trade issues. You remember the issue of cattle, the issue of chicken that were banned, etc. Yet some of these legislators were mum in those circumstances. But I think with the kind of leaders now that have been sent to Yala, now the MPs elect for East African Legislative Assembly, I would want to anticipate much more vibrancy, because when you look at the import of the constituting instrument of the East African Legislative Assembly, for example, even Article 9, you realize that this assembly is supposed to speak to issues of, for example, international trade between or among the member states of the treaty, issues of agriculture or agribusiness, and all those issues, for example, and the commercial aspects, especially for Kenya and Tanzania, and Kenya, Uganda, and amongst other trading partners within the East African community, are crucial issues that I'd want to anticipate a critical contribution on the part of the now Yala MPs-elect.
Right. Nurdin, your thoughts on this?
You see, the sad reality is that, as you said, back in the day or recently, Yala has been more or less like a rewarding scheme. It has been a springboard for some, political springboard. You're sent there to actually come and try your luck after 5 years. We saw the former Yala MP now who tried to be a member of parliament, Simon Bogwa, who spent 3/4 of his time in Nairobi, other than at Yala. You see, the thing is, we need to understand what most of these people tend to do when they go to Yala. What legislation do they pass? There's a conversation about having a single currency in East Africa. a bank, a central bank for East Africa community, integration with Africa, and ease of doing business. You see, when you're at EALA, as a liaison to your country's parliament, we need to know what you're doing. And I really hope and pray that those who have gone there, as he said, there are those like Hassan Omar, there's Karobia, there's Winnie, and there's Shabal. We really hope and pray that, and Kanin, we really hope and pray, and the rest, we really hope and pray that they actually have best interest of Kenya moving forward. One, how we can improve our business, how we can actually, you know, we talk about opening borders, but it's more or less a myth, because if you look at our relationship with, let's say, Tanzania, it's a little bit frosty. How are you going to try and change that? You see, there are issues, because you're meant to liaise with your parliament, and also there are ways you can also liaise with the foreign minister. So I believe moving forward, I hope and pray that they have legislation that they already have pending, or what they're thinking about, so we can be able to open up this East African community, and people actually change their mentality. Because you see, it is sad when Kenya is seen as aggressive, or there are those who feel uncomfortable with Kenya. And we need to change that so that we can actually be talking about a single currency and such things. But at the end of the day, really hope and pray that it is not just a rewarding scheme. We know there are those who are lamenting, and we've seen comments from Jeremiah Kioni. You know, that comes with after the elections to EALA. But we hope and pray that those who have gone, they will actually bring a change. It's not just a rewarding scheme, or for you to go there and earn a salary for 5 years as you wait to come and try your luck in the Kenyan elections.
All right.
Yeah.
Mheshimiwa Njuguna, let's move on from that. And right on I believe on the 6th page of the Daily Nation, we have this story just adjacent to one of the biggest stories there. The Deputy President is setting himself a deadline to woo Mount Kenya Azimio lawmakers. Has put the deadline on the 31st, specifically, of December this year, to woo the politicians allied to the former president and Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition leader Raila Odinga, declaring that his quest to unite Mount Kenya region under one political roof and mentoring the young political leaders such as yourself is unstoppable, that he will ensure that those who had, in quotes, strayed into Azimio would be back by specifically the 31st of December. Is this something that is tenable? Of course, this is you know, a political ambition that the Deputy President hopes to achieve within that set period of time. But what do you make of it?
I think what he's trying to do is because this was brought up because of the EALA, you know, election. Because at the end of the day, the people from Mount Kenya who are affiliated with the Deputy President were also able to give Kanini Kega our votes as a son from the Mount Kenya.
Okay.
So I think the Deputy President is saying that we are making, you know, good strides. Like we are trying to bring the mountain and the people from the Mount Kenya together, so that at least we can be able to voice out in one voice. And he's saying, I mean, we are making those steps because at the end of the day, whatever was transpiring between 2022 general election was all about politics. But now we need to come together as a community, come together as people from the Mount Kenya, because he's the senior most politician when it comes to Mount Kenya. And he's telling them, I mean, we are opening doors. We are opening all the windows. Please come in. Let us join hands together and now start talking and discussing and trying to see how now do we help our people, especially those who come from the Mount Kenya, so we can be able to speak from one accord. So he's just saying we are giving ourselves a deadline to mediate, probably because at the end of the day, you cannot say you're giving a deadline and you're not leaching out. So we're also leaching out and saying, you know what, whatever transpired, because you remember it was very, the general election was not okay, because I mean, they were throwing words here and there. You know, there were people who were against him. There were others who were supporting him. And now he's saying now it is time, because now we are one family. You know, we leave the sibling rivalry aside. We come together so that now we can be able to speak as one, as far as the Mount Kenya is concerned. So he's just saying we are giving ourselves a deadline. Between now and 31st, we must bring everybody on board so that now after the new year, there is nothing to do with Kenya Kwanza, with Azimio. We start pushing the interest of the Mount Kenya together as one. So I think he's not giving out a deadline as per se, that if you don't come by this time, then after January you'll not reach out to me.
No, there's no ultimatum here, but of course
we are having a working plan.
Right.
Like between now and 31st.
But the questions are, look, let me just hold on to that thought. We have to take a break. When we come back, what does it mean for those who've come out with the argument that this will destroy the democracy that we're already building in terms of even the democracy within political parties and the positions that they play within the larger democracy in the country. That's what we'll have a conversation when we come back on M Live in just a moment. Let's take a quick break. The hashtag to use is MLiveNTV, as always, at NTV Kenya, at Zainab Ismail. We'll continue with the conversation and get much deeper into that issue of the GMO and the politics around it. What is it all about? Let's take a break. We'll be back.
Hello, my name is Dr. Edward Mungai, and I will be attending Man Cave on the 26th of November 2022. I'm therefore inviting you to join me and other men as we discuss important issues about men. It will be about goal setting, it will be about relationship and friendship. It is also about, the networks that we can make and how we can create wealth. I am really looking forward to seeing you as we try to chart the way forward for the year 2023 and for us to have the most beautiful year 2023. And, of course, you have to get your ticket at Kenya Bus, for the Men Cave on the 26th of November 2022, where we will have a lot of fun, a lot of networking, a lot of good food, and a lot of good entertainment, including good music. And I look forward to seeing you there at the Karen Summer House.
To get Abiro Paki by Esther Williams, dial star 811 star 934 hash. Skiza, Non-Nation.
Who is a man and what defines a man?
Strong and sacrificing.
Passionate and purposeful.
Industrious and independent.
A leader and a lover. Ambitious and adventurous.
Provider and protector.
But wait, what of the weak and wounded? And what beats down and bothers the brothers?
What are the real feelings of the fellas?
Well, whatever season you're in, we welcome you to the Man Cave. What beats a Saturday afternoon with the boys, sharing experiences, networking, socializing, digging into good food, grooving to great music by DJ Jom Falme and Hype God, and learning from inspirational presentations by an eminent panel of men? From wealth to health, retirement, authentic relationships, coping with midlife crisis, or just re-examining your role as a man. Come to this gathering of men, the Man Cave. Saturday, 26th November, 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Summer House, Karen. Grab your tickets at 2,500 shillings from Kenya Bus.
The Man Cave. Be there.
We know your flavor, and that's how you inspire us to always deliver the best quality meals made fresh with locally sourced ingredients. Galitos, bold African flavor.
Get the Galitos Hot Box and a 500 ml Coke Soda at just 699 Kenya shillings.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching M Live on NTV. The hashtag we're using is MLiveNTV at NTV Kenya, at Zainab Ismail. Still with me here in studio, Mheshimiwa John Njuguna MP Kiambaa, Javas Bigambo, political communication strategist and expert as well as lawyer, and Nordin Kagai, advocate and political analyst as well. Javas, so you heard from Mheshimiwa, so the Deputy President, of course, setting himself, that deadline to woo those who had joined Azimio team during the campaign, saying now this is time. We work together, but you have to join us on this side so that we work together. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it is an attempt at political persuasion on the part of the DP. Nonetheless, the greater effort by analyzing that sentiment by His Excellency the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is that he wants to create a political behemoth in the Kenya Kwanza alliance.
Right.
Additionally, it is no-brainer that the DP wants to make himself the political supremo of Central Kenya. He wants to be the ultimate leader taking control of Mount Kenya region. Remember that with the exit of former President Uhuru Kenyatta, Mount Kenya evidently does not have a clear political leader that can steer its way forward, except now in the position of the DP. If he sleeps on the job, if he sits on his laurels, as we know nature abhors vacuum, such vacuum will be filled by other energetic, ambitious persons. Remember that in the struggle for Mount Kenya supremacy, naively, we are seeing that even Honorable Martha Karua is still fighting for her life and for survival. It is not because she's contesting the outcome of the election that concluded in August. It is because she wants to cut an opportunity for herself to be a leader of that mountainous region.
Right.
And looking at it from that perspective, you realize that the Deputy President has got a clear chance, a carrot and stick, and a way to shepherd Mount Kenya.
Is it by the virtue of the fact that he's a Deputy President?
One, by the virtue of such office as Deputy President. He is now the senior-most leader in government from the Mount Kenya region. Remember that he's also a shrewd political operative, and he knows that if Mount Kenya is divided across various interests and goes into various vehicles, then even creating a stronger bargain will be a bit difficult. And remember that it is desirous, I think, on the part of the Deputy President to have the Mount Kenya vote entirely now in one basket.
Right.
Remember that it is curious also how certain other Mount Kenya leaders have remained quiet since the finalization of the election. People like Honorable Peter Kenneth, Martha Karua is shouting, of course, from the rooftops, and other leaders. We're seeing now others trying to move into line and trying to have, as the DP is saying, water must get to find its level. People like Honorable Ngunjiri is now demonstrating his support for the Kenya Kwanza administration. Kanini Kega and even Jeremiah Kioni has indicated that now the debt for Raila Odinga has been paid.
Right.
Just like the Christians say that the debt was paid on the cross, now they went to the cross to pay the debt for Raila Odinga, and they are done with him, as it's indicated. And so I think here, it is a question of ensuring that the political water for Mount Kenya region finds its ultimate level. And the person to bring that level right now is Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua.
Before I get to Nordin, what does that mean for the Azimio team that really worked hard to consolidate at least a significant amount of support from that region?
Well, for the Azimio leadership, there was a mythical claim in the run-up to the election that the mountain had been scaled by Honorable Raila Odinga. And I think by the outcome of the election, it seems that the mountain was extremely slippery for Honorable Raila Odinga, and he could not scale it, even with the support of former President Uhuru Kenyatta.
Right.
With that in mind, after the election, we have not seen Honorable Raila Odinga come out, sticking his chest out trying to fight again for the interests of Mount Kenya region. Actually, he cannot fight for those interests because he's not in government. There is nothing that he can lure Mount Kenya region with. But Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua can, President William Ruto can. In fact, can even scale up the development interests and projects in that region to woo that mountainous region even further.
So he holds the goodies bag.
He holds it. And so we can actually, personally, I can nearly come to a conclusion that the Mount Kenya region has finally slipped out of the hands of Honorable Raila Odinga.
Right. Nordin, what is your take on that? Is it the fact that the Mount Kenya region has completely slipped out of the hands of Raila Odinga, and the space that the Deputy President is taking to ensure that he consolidates the whole bloc as one?
One, as we started today, you played a clip from the ODM SG. He said that some people were lying to Raila that he had climbed the mountain, that there were votes. And those people are now claiming that they have delivered votes and now they want to part with him, you know. So I think it starts from there. There's a lot of deceit, which is very true. Those who told him that, they even sang a song, Mlima yote ni yako, you know. But in reality, what came out was sad. But at least it is better than what he's been getting over the years.
Correct.
I believe moving forward, the Deputy President's eyes are on 2027. Let us be honest with one another. Because in Kenya, we win elections to plan for the next election. And they are now trying to consolidate whatever is, the small percentage that is outside, want to bring it back home. And that will be brought courtesy of they'll call it community interest. Like Bigambo just said, there will be a lot of government projects that will lure people. And you know, there are those who have lost elections courtesy of being in Azimio. And now some of them, you know, they're not used to being out in the cold, per se. So now they're saying they see him as the new leader. You know, you say that's what actually, you come closer to him and you get something. We have to be honest as well. So I believe it's more or less, there are a lot of interest playing around. One, his interest is to be seen as the next in line because, as we all know, the former president is gone. There's a vacuum. And everybody is trying to see who can actually lead the mountain. Him, by virtue of being the senior most political figure there, sees it's an easier route if I go after it. And then he would want to consolidate that around him so that because of bargaining interest. That's why I'm saying the play is 2027. And we wait to see how it plays out because I see Azimio has called for a meeting. You know, the best way to actually solve these issues, like the former Prime Minister just said, is a storm in a teacup. It starts like that, then it becomes a hurricane. And when it becomes a hurricane, you can't stop it. So the small issues, you solve them by having meetings and looking at the interest. Sad reality is that there is nothing he can offer those who have lost the former Prime Minister because he's not in government. So the interests that some of them have are beyond him. Because if you want, let's say, a parastatal or you want to be something in government and he's not the president, he can't offer you that. So at the end of the day, there are those who will move away because of selfish interest, but there are those who will remain with him and trying to, let's say, carve a political career away from Kenya Kwanza. But it will be hard seeing that the Deputy President is actually hell-bent on making sure that the entire region is in government and he plays a role in making sure that he is the supreme. Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to another issue here, suddenly a big one. Fresh storm at IBC as divisions deepen. So this is a fresh storm that is gathering at the electoral agency ahead of the exit of the commission chairperson. There you have it, Wafula Chebukati, which is going to be happening next year. Wafula Chebukati has found himself at the center of the controversy in what insiders have termed unilateral decisions at the commission. Multiple interviews with the commission staff have painted a grim picture of a disjointed organization that is deeply divided, with various staff having divided loyalties. Remember, you have the other part with the controversy coming as the four petitions have been filed in the National Assembly seeking the removal of Vice Chairperson Juliana Cherera and Commissioners Justice Nyangaya, Irene Masit, and Wanderi Kamara on grounds of gross violation of the Constitution and a breach of the oath of office to the actions their actions following the August 9th presidential election. 3 other petitions have also been filed at the National Assembly for the removal of Chebukati, Abdi Gulie, who's a commissioner, and Boya Molu, who are also poised to exit the commission next year. Mheshimiwa, just looking at what is happening in the IEBC, is it time that we should just do a complete overhaul, at least, you know, when you're talking about the leadership of IEBC and the management of IEBC at this point, then we start planning for the next, you know, election?
I think that is where we are now heading to, because at the end of the day, the chairman, he's exiting. Actually, his term is coming to an end around January.
Right.
But there are also other petitions that has been filed, so that we need to clean up the whole IEBC system, because the chairperson and the 4 commissioners and the way they the way they showed during the general election in 2022, that probably we thought that probably they would come up and take over the role and the leadership of the IEBC. But I think as a country we need to have a conversation, an honest conversation, and see whether we really need to do an overhaul to the IEBC. Even if they did a very good job on this election, there is a lot that we have been able to achieve. Yes.
Remember?
Yeah, it was contested, yes, because at the end of the day, there is no way.
And you still have those who feel like they did not do a good job.
Yeah, but generally, when you look at how the IEBC conducted this particular general election, we can actually say that there was a lot of achievement comparing with the 2017 general election. We have made some serious, achievements. As far as the IEBC and the way they were conducting their the way they conduct their general election is concerned. So I think there is also a serious conversation that we are supposed to have as a country. Like, do we really need to do an overhaul? And we really need to do that because there are some people who feel aggrieved by the 4 commissioners. The chairman and the 3 commissioners, also their term is coming to an end. So we are just saying, let us have an honest conversation. There is a petition ongoing. I've seen the parliament have advertised because of that petition for the 4 IEBC commissioners, that we can now start having a conversation. Do we need to remove them? Did they at any given time, show or exhibit that they did not perform or do their duties as they were supposed to do as per the Constitution? Because at the end of the day, even if you are appointed by a certain government, you have a role, you have a responsibility to make sure that the election is free and fair and credible. But you cannot be seen like at the end of the day you are divided as a commissioner. So I think we are supposed to have an honest conversation, and this doesn't have really to be Kenya Kwanza and Azimio. As a country, we need to have one conversation, because we, during the general election, we showed that at any given time, the commissioners have a lot of power. They can either take this country to the dog, or they can probably perform their duties according to the Constitution and make sure at the end of the day that they deliver what they are supposed to deliver, no matter whether you are appointed by the president, whether you are appointed by a certain coalition. Because what we saw last time is because 3 were for the Kenya Kwanza, 4 were for Azimio. Those people will be given an opportunity, especially the chair. He must, show that he has a responsibility and know that he has a responsibility to make sure that he do the right thing. So I think it's a conversation that we are supposed to have, an honest one, from across the political divide, all the parties involved, all the Kenyans involved on this. And then now, when it comes to erecting the chair, we should always participate and make sure that we get the right person for this job. So I think it is something that we are going to keep debating, because that petition is in the floor of the House. Then once the petition succeeds, because at the end of the day, we come for voting, probably to decide whether the 4 commissioners will go home, or whether we will have an opportunity to appoint the new whole commission. Because from the Kenya Kwanza where we stand, I think that's our position, that we need to do the overhaul on the IEBC, so that at least we make sure we have enough time, and we have given them enough time to start preparing for 2027 general election. Yes.
Bwana Javas, I don't know what you make of this. So we're way past the election, but there is still a lot that is happening at the electoral agency. Where do you think the problem is when we're looking at the individuals that are at the management and the leadership of IEBC? Or is it the laws that is, governing the agency itself?
The problem is everywhere. I look right, left, north, south. I see problems everywhere with regard to IEBC, and for these reasons. If it's a question to do with the removal of the 4 commissioners, the provisions in the Constitution pursuant to Article 251 provide mechanisms of removing commissioners from office. And now 4 petitions have been received by the Speaker of the National Assembly for the removal of the 4 commissioners. And the process has begun. Of course, Parliament will have to establish through a committee and a recommendation to the President as to whether the affidavit evidence and any other annexures provided by the petitioners give sufficient ground as to whether those commissioners violated the law and therefore warrant removal from office pursuant to Article 251 of the Constitution. And then, of course, that will be given to the President, who will suspend the commissioners and then establish or form a tribunal.
It's a very clear-cut structure.
A clear-cut mechanism.
Right.
But also, interestingly, there are now 3 other petitions, which I can call counter petitions for the removal of Chebukati and the 2 other commissioners, which I think is an afterthought to the initial effort or the initial 4 petitions for the removal of the Cherera 4, if we may call them as such. But beyond that, there are certain missteps that we've made in this country. For example, we appreciate that legally, the position of the chair to the commission is equivalent in terms of qualification to a judge of the Supreme Court of Kenya.
Right.
Now, if at all, in the circumstances that Chebukati, as it is now, is incapable of executing his functions or even is removed from office, for example, if his time was still alive or active, would Cherera ascend to the office of chair or even hold that chair in the interim? The fact that she does not qualify to be a judge of the Supreme Court provides or gives us a legal lacuna, a challenge in that circumstance, actually a constitutional issue. And so I think the onus now is on Parliament, which then means that for persons to be chair and even vice chair of the commission, that person must be a lawyer.
So they must meet those certain criteria.
So which means that in the situation we find ourselves in, Parliament missed this country.
Right.
Secondly, the other problem that I see here is the too much political involvement in the affairs of the IEBC.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that politicians and the country should not be concerned about how that independent commission is run and managed. But to the extent that even external forces want to interfere, direct, manipulate, and puppeteer the work of the commissioners and the commission itself is a cause for worry. Moving forward, we may want to rethink mechanisms of how we get to have commissioners in that office. If at all it's a question of political parties appointing or nominating persons or representatives, commensurate to the IPPG scenario, can we then agree as a country that persons that have been sent by political parties or nominated by political parties as IEBC commissioners will take oath of office to serve the country and not be particularly inclined to the interests of the political party that sent them there?
Right.
Because that's where another problem is. We don't need to populate constitutional commissions with religious leaders, because being a religious leader itself is not a qualification on matters governance, matters constitutional, matters gender, etc. So I think what we need to do, not just for IEBC alone, all other independent commissions, we need to think about how we populate those commissions with commissioners. And then we must respect the letter and spirit of the Constitution. If at all the framers of the Constitution drafted and we endorsed it in a referendum that these commissions, including IEBC, is supposed to be an independent commission, can we then afford such a commission its independence? Why should we want to have or desire to have an independent commission and have such codified in the Constitution, and then because of other political interests and influence, we want to commandeer and puppeteer commissioners to do work outside the mandate that is freely given to them by the Constitution. So that's where the problem is, political interference. To the extent that there will be not so much political interference in the work of the IEBC, and to the extent that IEBC commissioners and staff will not yield themselves to the persuasions of politics and tribal or political inclinations and regional interests, I think from that moment on, we will have a truly liberal and independent commission.
Right. And certainly a lot of things that are surrounding this issue. Nordin, your thoughts on the same? Look, we're in a new election cycle, so certainly something must be done before we reach that date in 2027.
Yeah, you see, the problem at IEBC, I'll put it simply, it's leadership and integrity. That is it, because when you talk about political interference, it falls under that. It talks about your integrity. When you talk about, the headline is impunity and unilaterally deciding things courtesy of Chebukati.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. It talks about your leadership, if that is at all true. So at the end of the day, we need to raise the leadership and integrity threshold in this country so that one can be, so that you're not swayed, you know, into political gimmicks by political interest, you know, so that we actually realize the independence that was envisioned when we called it the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Because there's no point of having that word independent there if there's a puppet master somewhere at the end of the day. We need, you see, there are those who still don't believe in IEBC after these elections. And so we have to come up with a new IEBC. At the end of the day, courtesy of, you see, we are seeing Chebukati is going home and the other two. And then we see there are petitions in Parliament. We are waiting to see what the members of Parliament do. If at all it gets to a point where everybody is sent home courtesy of the legal process, then the IEBC that we have needs to gain confidence from the people. And as Javas just said, you know, being a religious leader doesn't mean you become a saint. You know, we shouldn't be looking into only your religious leader or look at the political interest. The leadership and integrity actually matters the most, so that whatever you declare after the elections is actually believable. The process is actually open, it's actually fair, it's actually credible at the end of the day, so that we can actually say, you know, this election is, we're sure there's no election which would be contested in this world, courtesy of, you know, we always have a winner and a loser. But the threshold of the results that you actually release need to be seen to be believable at the end of the day. People need to look at this commission and say, you know, they gain confidence in it. Because when they lose confidence, whatever you do, people always say, you know what, there's someone somewhere who cooked those figures and you're just given to read. So at the end of the day, we really come from a place where Chapter 6 of the Constitution has never been realized in this country. It's there, but it has not been breathed into life. And the moment we do that, then we'll be able to move as a country. Because those who are sent to these offices will actually realize that you're actually serving the interests of the people and you use taxpayers' money. And if you misuse the taxpayers' money, you also have to come to a point where you actually, a legal remedy is gotten against you, because if you misuse what is seen as taxpayers' money, you need to be surcharged. So at the end of the day, we work on our leadership and integrity so that we can actually be able to, not just IEBC, all the other commissions, even Parliament, because they should never be seen as a conveyor belt. And they should never only be seen to propel what the government wants. If whatever the government wants and is against the people, as a representative of the people, you tell the government no, irrespective of whether you're in government or purported you're in opposition. Because for me, I see if you're a member of Parliament, you still do oversight over the same government, even if you're in that government. So at the end of the day, we need to look at Chapter 6 wholly. It is there, we have abundance of laws, but the problem is implementation of these laws.
Yes. Javas, you had a point.
Additionally, quite a quick thought on my part is that, is there a cryptic scheme to hinder political rights and participation on the part of some, as well as lead us into some kind of political minefield? Now, with this attempt to remove all these commissioners, when you consider all the 7 petitions, question is, can and will the IEBC, if at all they are successful, operate without commissioners? The Constitution does not contemplate an IEBC operating without commissioners. Remember that as we are speaking right now, there are by-elections that have been organized that are for December. There are a number of election petitions in the courts, and some of them, upon being successful, an election, a by-election or various by-elections will be conducted at the beginning of the year. Remember that all these petitions to do with the elections must be concluded within 6 months of the election. Now, issue is this: if at all there is all this creative interference with the commission, are we trying to forestall, are some politicians trying to forestall the operations and ground the operations of this commission, and in fact put into misplace the serious credibility of this commission by having no commissioners, having no clear authority to run and conduct affairs as provided for in law. And so I think, given that the Constitution provides that sovereign power belongs to the people, and such power is executed directly or indirectly through elected representatives, now through Parliament, these elected representatives have an opportunity to make sense of all these attempted approaches to remove commissioners, some of them for maybe very flimsy or naive reasons.
Interesting. Mheshimiwa has certainly been listening to those proposals. Very
he had made some serious remarks before.
Right.
For example, when he said about the chairman and the vice chair, you know, the qualification of the chairman and the vice chair should be the same.
Right.
For the moment, because when in the absence of the chairman, you know, the vice chair takes over.
Right.
But the qualifications for the chair and the vice chair, they tend to
There's
differ.
only a gap over there.
There is a serious gap around it.
Right.
So I think it is something we are not yet out of the hook, I would say so. But I think we need also to have this honest conversation and agree. Because we have a lot of time to prepare for 2027 election, general election. And we don't want it to be opaque like the 2022 general election. So we really need to look at the commissioners and even the judgment of the Supreme Court and how they say that we need to look at the responsibilities and the duties of the chair versus all the commissioners, because according to the Supreme Court ruling, it seems like the commissioners, their work is just to rubber stamp whatever the chair is saying. So I think it's an honest conversation that we are supposed to have. If we need to amend the law, then this is the best time for us to do that, because the only election that is a bit controversial is the presidential general election. But when it comes to these other elections, we don't have a lot of heated debate, surrounding it. So I think for us to be able to make sure that the IEBC is fully equipped, the laws is in place, we have the right chairman, we have the right vice chair. And as my friend Korigia is saying, that also we need also to make sure that in terms of leadership and integrity, it has been adhered to. And therefore we make sure that all the leaders all the commissioners who are going to be appointed, they have been given enough time to study the IEBC, to come up with any anything that they need to for the purposes of making sure that 2027 general election has been conducted in free and fair and credible manner. So I think it's a conversation. We cannot just say because there is already a petition, it's political. It could be political because of the 4 commissioners, but whatever we saw during the 2027 general election at the Selena, I mean, it's something to worry us. So if we don't sit down, we can only sit down and say we are waiting another Serena 4 in 2027. No, we might look like we are not serious as a country. So I think it's a conversation that we need to have. We bring all the commissioners on board. We agree across the political divide. We need to do an overhaul to the IEBC so that at least we make sure all the people, all the politicians participate, even if it's the different coalition, or we involve the country in making sure that we have the right commissioners who will be able to conduct the general election come 2027.
All right, it will be interesting to see what will happen. Look, let's just wind up on the papers here now, but this is very important. Let me just touch on that. So COP27 has failed to deliver on plans to reduce global emissions. The parties have agreed to set up a loss and damage fund that will help developing countries deal with devastating impact of climate change. So that's a positive part there. And COP27, however, has failed to deliver to plan to drastically reduce emissions, even as it welcomed loss and damage agenda while calling for a roadmap to double adaptation finance to 40 billion by 2025. Remember that they say those talks will be pushed to not later than 2024. So this is good. Now, this is despite parties for the first time after 30 years agreeing to establish that loss and fund damage that will help developing countries deal with the devastating impact of the climate crisis. Like tomorrow, we'll be having that discussion much deeper and looking at the resolutions at COP27. All right, and this is what we have on the front page of Business Daily. Bill sets up KRA tax dragnet for cryptocurrency users. Taxation of the crypto exchanges and digital wallets proposed. Crypto traders likely liable for income tax. And Interesting report actually there by Edwin Mutai with regard to the Kenya Revenue Authority going after more than 4 million Kenyans who own cryptocurrency if MPs approve changes to the law aimed at regulating and taxing the fast-growing digital currency trade. And down there, Parliament Budget Office doubting Ruto's first-term plan. The office that advises members of Parliament on budget planning has raised doubts on the ability of the Kenya Kwanza administration to fund its ambitious economic growth and job creation plan while enforcing spending cuts. That's the PBO, that's the Parliamentary Budget Office, saying the president will struggle to fully implement the interventions whose cost is estimated at 2.67 trillion in the 5 years to 2027. Remember, this new administration rode to power on the promise of helping to lower the cost of living, creating jobs and turning around the fortunes of sectors such as the agriculture. And also very importantly, and they speak about much widely, is on the issue of the small and medium-sized enterprises. Just very quickly, gentlemen, what do you make of this? I mean, so this is interesting, and Kenyans have a lot of hope. I'll begin with you, Mheshimiwa, from there, and then we're going to get views from Javas. So, but very briefly, I mean, so there's a lot of hope, and you know, Kenya Kwanza came into power with this whole promise of, you know, what do you call it? I mean, it's a transformation of a country. We're going to do all these things, but it seems it's not as easy as it appears.
Definitely, it's not easy as it appears because we inherited a country that, you know, had nothing in the coffers.
All right.
And at the end of the day, I think what the president is trying to say is that even if we are in a dire need of borrowing, or there is an urge for us to borrow, we need to slow down on our borrowing.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, we cannot continue digging the hole. We find ourselves in the hole, but we continue digging the same hole. So there are measures that he's saying that we are going to put some serious measures, which probably will affect the way the economy is, probably because there is what we are calling the pending bills that has been, you know, the elephant in the room. Because as we speak, all the roads, constructions, all the projects have stalled. Reason being because there is no money to pay the contractors and for the contractors to be able to continue this kind of a job. So we have a plan, yes, but this plan may not, it's not an immediate, it is not a plan that we are going just to put in the table and then things start landing. I mean, there'll be some areas which are going to slow. There are some other areas which are going to be faster than we were expecting, especially on the issues of the Hustlers Fund. Those are some of the things that are seriously touching on the common mwananchi, that he said we better stall serious projects in terms of expressway, in terms of having a green airport, but we make sure that we have been able to empower the common mwananchi, that is Mama Boga, the Hasra, the Pikipiki, and the Boda guy, giving them an area whereby they can be able to borrow so that they can be able to continue with their business. But on the same, we are able also to get some revenues and increase our revenue correction, you know, from whatever we have been correcting. So I think it is a conversation that probably people expected when Ruto gets into power, it will be like a magic watch or something that, you know, the moment he's sworn in, things will be different. But I don't think so. And he's saying,
but you do remember there were promises that were made during the campaign trail, like, look, in the next 100 days, we are going to make sure that this and this and this is happening.
Actually, look at whatever he said within the 100 days. Has he been able to achieve? Some of the issues that he said that within 100 days I'll be able to do, which are more of policy, you know, issues that he has been able to, you know, to effect. But when it comes to real issues in terms of economy, because that's where the elephant is, that's where the bone of contention is, that people are willing, they want to see an economy that probably they're able to move, getting food, lowering the cost of living, getting food on their table, getting employment, business, you know, small and medium enterprises getting access, they can be able to access credit. That is what people are looking up to as the long term. But in terms of short-term goals that we said, this is what we are going to achieve within 100 days. I think we are doing very well. We are about 60 or 75%, which is an A, considering the situation that the country was before. So I think we have a collective responsibility. It has nothing only to do with William Ruto, but also us as readers. He has really lined up serious registration in Parliament to help him achieve whatever he promised that he's going to do. So I think we are requesting the public also to give him a little bit of time to organize his house, because as you see now, even the PSAs are not in place. We only have the CSAs. After the PSAs, we're going to have the CEOs of the parastatals and the directors and all that. When the government is fully operational, I think from that point we can now be able to see things moving.
All right.
Yeah.
That's Nordin. I see you're laughing. I mean, what we do? Look, and it is indeed true that the president and the deputy have asked Kenyans to look, give us time. Let's make sure that our government is complete, so that we can be able to reap the fruits of how we are working and what we're working for.
I think what we need to do as Kenyans and those who seek political offices is that when you make a promise, look at the magnitude of the promise you make. Because you see, as he rightfully says, there are those promises that were made for, in 100 days, ABCD will be done, nikika Biblia chini, and people anticipate. They're like, we want this, we're expecting this. But the reality actually checks in once you get into office. And you realize it takes a lot of policy to do certain things. It takes a lot of planning to do certain things. But now, as he says, they've put aside mega projects like Expressway and Ital, but also been told 1,000 dams. So at the end of the day, we actually need to see what they plan to do moving forward. From Parliament, what we are seeing is that there are questions, of course, because this is a government that told us once they got into office, they have inherited a dilapidated economy. All right,
which is very true.
Which is exactly,
yeah.
And that is why I guess Parliament has doubts on the first budget. But we wait to see what they actually intend to do, because at the end of the day.
So it is fair on their part to say, look, give us time.
Yes, it is true, because at the end of the day, you can't judge them by the time they will be in office. It takes a lot of planning to do certain things. And I think now they've gotten to the realization that you don't just get into office and do whatever you promised. Sadly, it is funny because most of these people have been in government since time immemorial, since they got into politics, and they couldn't understand that. But because we are in the political season, you have to promise heaven. And when you get into office, when people expect heaven, when it's never delivered, it becomes an issue.
All right.
So that's why I'm saying there are those who anticipated a lot. So I guess they have to manage the expectations.
All right. Jarvis, your thoughts on this? Do we need to look back at our expectations and say, okay, let's give this government a chance?
The expectations is not the problem.
What's the problem?
And here, I would say that for Kenya Kwanza to strive to implement every commitment that they made on the political campaign trail, and even upon ascension into office, is akin to boiling the ocean. Now, what comes to my mind right now is the empirical and ontological debate that we must have to do with the manner in which political parties and coalitions formulate their manifestos. Because I think political parties, most of the time, make policy proposals during the campaigns that are so much flowery and so enticing to the populace, but when it comes to the implementation of those proposals, they will not be quick wins. The proposals and commitments to deliver on a number of things within the first 100 days in office may not be particularly practical. And I think it's important for right now Kenyans to, and they are rightly in place to demand and to expect so much of the Kenya Kwanza administration.
Right.
Because their expectations are hinged on the commitments that were made. But now practically, even President William Ruto and Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua have indicated that it is quite judicious to afford them time because of the fiscal challenges that we are facing as a country.
All right.
Remember the budgetary proposals, for the cuts that have been proposed by the president. What I think would be even more prudent and sagacious is that the executive in this country gets to be quite cautious on various pronouncements.
All right.
That they should not even keep on promising so much, because that promising is what people will think that the government officials are lying. Additionally, members of the cabinet secretaries, should realize that their pronouncements pursuant to the, or by virtue of the offices they hold, inform and affect policy. And so some of the reckless pronouncements and promises and commitments being made on the podium, some of them forget that they're cabinet secretaries, and any statement they make will affect the you know, the policy dimensions, will affect how even parastatals operate. And so I think what is important is for people to be realistic, especially those that took oath of office to execute various mandates.
Okay. And we're just going to end on that point, because I want us to get into the conversation on the issue of GMO, of course, on the very front page of the Daily Nation. But before that, let's take a look at this quick report by Sydney Chazima, where the planned importation of GMO maize continues to run into political headwinds. And Azimio la Umoja One Kenya leader Raila Odinga yesterday in a press briefing castigated the Kenya Kwanza administration for what he calls overlooking the health and well-being of Kenyans in order to please international interest. Is it the case? Let's first take a look at that report.
Of genetic
All right, so look, we've gone a bit of a hitch there, but we'll be getting that report by Sydney Chazima in a moment. But this is quite a big issue. Let me just get to that front page of the Daily Nation to look at what they're saying and then get into that conversation, because there's a lot of politics that is surrounding the issue of GMO, aside from the science itself, where you have the opposition leader Raila Odinga, who wants the plan to import GM maize halted, even as it challenges the government to make available scientific studies it relied on to lift ban on genetically modified organisms, and asking legislators to lead the debate on the grave matter. That's on pages 2 and 3 of the Daily Nation. Says, and I quote what he says, "We appeal to the people's representatives to lead this discussion with immediate effect and invite Kenyans to submit their views. This is a matter of grave national importance and cannot be decided in secrecy and opacity by the cabinet." We understand we have that report by Sydney.
The raging debate on the imminent importation of genetically modified maize continues to rope in more voices. Azimio la Umoja One Kenya leader Raila Odinga has castigated the move, terming it detrimental to the country's agriculture sector.
This decision, which has been made without deliberation or public participation, will have far-reaching and catastrophic implications for the Kenya's agriculture, for the health of the Kenyan people and our environment.
Several European countries, including France, Germany and the Netherlands, have opted to ban the usage of GMO food. Odinga wonders what has informed the government's decision to approve GMO maize.
We note that in the most democratically and scientifically advanced countries, the question of GMOs remains one of the great public concern and controversy, if not outright rejection.
Other Azimio leaders have also weighed in on the issue, calling for the reduction of farm inputs to boost local farmers instead of opting for GMO maize.
Ruto alianza vizuri, akafanya maneno ya mbolea, akareduce bei. Tunataka pia hii maneno mengine hii fertilizer kama amereduce tena aongezee hao wakulima farm inputs. Si ndio hiyo?
Na hiyo mahindi kija saa hizi, hii tunauza 1500 itarudi shilingi 2000. Tunamwambia tuko na mahindi, angoje tuuze yetu iishe ndio tufikirie kuleta nini? Mahindi ingine. Na ukileta mahindi usituletee mahindi ya nini? Ya GMO.
Last week, Trade Cabinet Secretary Moses Kuria kicked up a storm, claiming that Kenyans have no choice but to accept the impending influx of GMO maize in the country.
Being in this country, you are a candidate for death. And because there's so many things competing for death, there's nothing wrong with adding GMO to that list. That is why we have deliberately decided to allow GMOs into this country.
Odinga has accused the Kenya Kwanza government of acting under pressure from international players.
The older Kenya Kwisha regime will subject Kenyans to unproven and dangerous foods in an attempt to please international interests and do not care about our safety. We ask Kenyans to oppose this move and to totally reject any GMO foods should they ever enter the Kenyan market.
On October 4th, 2022, President William Ruto lifted a 10-year ban on genetically modified crops, officially allowing for importation into the country. The government plans to import 10 million bags of GMO maize over the next 6 months in what is seen as one of the ways to boost food security in the country. Sydney Chazima, NTV.
So that's what's brewing right now. Suddenly a storm over the GMO issue and the politics that is surrounding that. Yesterday, the ODM leader, who's also the Azimio leader, talking about it. I want to get your thoughts on it and what you feel about it. But first, we have to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll have that conversation. Stay with us. The hashtag we're using is MLiveNTV. Stay with us.
New Nivea Radiant and Beauty Advanced Care. With 5 oils and 5 vitamins. 48-hour nourishment. Helps reduce appearance of stretch marks in just 2 weeks. New Nivea Radiant and Beauty Advanced Care. For your shade of beautiful.
As calls for a green world get louder at the COP27 summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, we look at the cost of going green for Africa. 27 years since the inception of COP, has there been any progress in stemming global warming and its effects on the planet? We tell you all about it. And we debunk some of the common myths and misconceptions about climate change.
Did you know you can open a family bank account without having to visit a branch? Simply download Pesapap app from Google Play Store or Apple Store to enjoy freedom and convenience. All you need is your ID card, KRA PIN and camera phone.
Gabon's economy has long been anchored on its oil revenues. However, the tide is changing. I'm here in Libreville to find out how the country is sustainably betting on the vast wealth of its green resources.
I am just getting started in wrestling, and I am giving in my best to get the coveted crown of King of the Arenas. And my ambition is to sit on the throne in the next 5 to 7 years.
Santon, a fun new world of flavor, fruity freshness in every sip.
Hey, my name is Kevin Miner, and on the 26th of November, I will be attending the Man Cave at Summer House in Karen. It's going to be a man's affair, and I expect to see you there. There's going to be lots of great food, entertainment, socializing, networking. There's going to be a panelist that you're going to have an opportunity to listen to and get something from. So get your tickets right now at Kenya Buzz. Remember, November 26th, Summer House, Karen. See you then.
We know your flavor, and that's how you inspire us to always deliver the best quality meals made fresh with locally sourced ingredients. Galitos, bold African flavor.
Get the Galitos Hot Box and a 500 ml Coke soda at just 699 Kenya shillings.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching M Live on NTV. This is a conversation we're having. Yesterday, we did see the Azimio la Umoja leader, Raila Odinga, urging Parliament to oppose GMOs, saying Kenyans' health and environment is at risk. He's challenged the government to make available the scientific studies it relied on to lift ban on GMOs. Let me begin with you, Jarvis, on this particular issue. So some say that this is Raila Odinga playing politics with the whole issue of GMO. But then there's also the issue of even those members of parliament who are allied to Kenya Kwanza and the government's administration saying, look, especially those coming from the Rift Valley region saying, look, our farmers are growing maize. We need, NCPB to open the doors and we'll sell them the maize. So they're opposing this whole issue. What do you make of what is happening really with regard to this?
I have listened to former Prime Minister Raila Odinga on the issue of the GMOs. I've also listened to Honorable Cherargei, Senator, on the issue of the GMOs against the background of the 10 million bags of maize that are to be imported within the 6-month period, as well as against the backdrop of the lifting of the 10-year ban that had been imposed in 2012 on the GMOs. In fact, let us appreciate that the issue of GMOs remains a very significant headlining political, media, and health issue. Now, in 2012, the decision of the Kibaki cabinet to ban the GMOs was predicated on what I can say a fairly controversial research by a French scientist, Eric Seralini, that found that actually rats had contracted cancer upon ingestion of GMO food, actually maize. And that was a great concern. In Africa, we know very many other countries, Algeria, Egypt, that have got laws prohibiting or restricting GMOs. When you go to a country like New Zealand, there is a total ban on GMOs. So it is interesting, and actually it should have been followed by a serious advisory and notes on what informed the lifting of the 10-year ban by the cabinet. Additionally, when you look at it historically, you realize that from around 1980s is when Kenya began the journey or beating the path of entertaining the issue of GMOs. And from that period, we have seen various legislative and even institutional frameworks being put in place for matters to do with biotechnology. Today, we have got the National Biotechnology Act of 2009 that established the National Biotechnology Authority. That authority has got the powers to do with the issue of the importation, transportation, and even utility of everything to do with biotechnology in this country. Since the lifting of the ban by the cabinet, we have not had a single word from the National Biosafety Authority, which actually brings together various stakeholders, whether they are farmers, researchers, intellectuals, and even other institutions that have to do with the issue of biotechnology. Additionally, let us remember that when you listen to the remarks and concern ourselves with the issues of a GMO, we have to look at it from the perspective of Article 46 of the Constitution, which provides for consumer rights. And we also have got the Consumer Protection Act 2012 that provides for the safety of all consumers of products in this country, and in fact also outlines punitive measures for persons that violate the provisions of the Consumer Protection Act. Curiously too, COFEC, the Consumer Federation of Kenya, has not concerned itself or raised its voice critically on this issue of GMOs. And it is important, therefore, that the government comes out to protect Kenyans against the myriad concerns to do with genetically modified foods. Remember that when you look at Article 2, Sub-Article 6 of the Constitution, it provides that every or any treaty and convention that has been ratified by Kenya provides or becomes or forms part of the laws of Kenya. Now, in 1993, we had the Cartagena Protocol, which is actually the universal, solely independent and authoritative mechanism that provides for various protocols, mechanisms on biosafety that protects consumption, research, transportation, and utility of anything to do with biotechnology. And then we've got also the various World Trade Organization frameworks. For example, we have got the sanitary and phytosanitary guidelines. We have got the General Agreements on Trade and Tariff by the World Trade Organization, the IPPI as well. All these frameworks are very instrumental on protecting the safety of human beings in terms of consumption of GMOs. Now here locally, we know very well that in 2012, we had the formulation of regulations by National Biosafety Authority on the issue of GMOs. But we know that at that time the constitution was still nascent and its implementation had just commenced. The issue of even public participation had not been given utmost attention the way public participation now has been reinforced by various judicial decisions, whether it was the Justice Odunga decision in 2015 concerning the Kiambu Public Participation Act, and even up to the Court of Appeal and even the Supreme Court, on the necessity of proper and satisfactory public participation. And so I think listening to various actors, I would say that it calls for a revisiting of the national regulations on biosafety, on GMOs and biotechnology in this country that were formulated in 2012, so that there is sufficient, adequate, proper public participation. Some of things may need to be reworked, rethought through. But then again, we know very well that when it comes to GMO seeds that will now take route in Kenya, to what extent have farmers in Kenya been apprised of the consequential effect of the GMOs?
All right.
Now, we know very well that Kenya does not have food sufficiency. Okay. And that's why it has depended on regional and international markets for importation of various cereals, etc. Now, with the entry, for example, of the 10 million bags within this period, to what extent is the safety assured of Kenyans? There are matters health as well. Now, curiously, while the CS for Trade, Moses Kuria, has spoken, and even comically on the issue of GMOs being part of the 1,001 ways to die in Kenya, we have not had any serious deliberations on this issue by the CS for Agriculture or even the CS for Health.
So this is suddenly this is a lot of issues, a compounding of issues with regards to what is happening right now. And of course, one of the most important aspects that also Raila Odinga is calling for is the issue of public participation. Let's hear from Mheshimiwa Njuguna on what you feel this whole conversation is about, because we are seeing even members from your own coalition saying, look, we're dissenting against the same decision that the government is making.
I think there is a lot of politics in this whole issue. And it's
is it though just politics?
Yeah,
because there are health concerns that have also been raised.
There are serious concerns that has been raised, but if you listen to Raila Odinga supporting when he was, I think it was the former Prime Minister who was supporting, of listening to a clip before I got here, where he was supporting the purchase or directive of government policies on to go on GMOs, and he was really into it because there is what formed his decision back then. And there is what is making him form his decision now. So probably there is what you call a public participation issue, which probably would also want to know what informed the cabinet to lift the ban. Because at the end of the day, if it is anything to do with the NBA, or they have been able to get some policies or some research that shows that probably GMOs is the way to go as a country. And I believe that is why they were able to lift the ban, because there is what informed their decision. But this is not what has been made public to the public, because there is what they're supposed to have done, especially on the issue of public participation. It is good to engage the community, it's good to engage the researchers, it's good to engage the farmers, it is good to engage the scientists, so that we can have, when we decide that we are going to go to the direction of the GMO, that all of us are informed, that probably the decision that the government is making is for the best of our interest. Whatever Cherargei is saying is because probably maize comes from part of the Rift Valley, probably, and he knows it's not even probably, because that is the basket, the food basket for the Kenyan people. But you see, now we are also heading towards an area, a season whereby now farmers are also preparing themselves to harvest. So importation of these GMOs will also affect the pricing of the maize, from the NCPBA, because there will be surplus in the market. So I think public participation is very key. We need to be informed, because there is a serious threat.
But do you feel that happened? Do you feel that, because that has not happened, because there's so many concerns that have been raised on this issue? Do you feel that this was a unilateral decision by the government, instead of bringing together all the stakeholders to say, look, we still need to look at all the pros, the cons, and what way forward for us as a country.
I agree. We should look at the pros and the cons. But I also listened to the Minister of Agriculture of Zambia, because they have also banned GMO. I have listened to Bill Gates saying that, you know, even if you ban GMOs, this is what we have been feeding ourselves on. The food that we have been importing from probably some of the multinational companies who are selling in Kenya, it is GMO food. So in one way or the other, we have been feeding on GMOs. But that does not even give the government the right, probably.
I see Javas is saying that's not true. But yeah.
It is true. But some of these multinational companies that sell food in Kenya, they normally import on GMOs.
I think we have to do some research on that to find out.
I don't even want to mention the companies, but there have been a serious research that probably what we have been feeding on, even way before the government allows the importation of GMOs, they are partly GMOs. But there is the pros and the cons. So we need to look at it holistically as a country, so that we ensure that we don't have any health hazard in terms of whatever we'll be importing, and which effect will it have on our community, especially now because there is a rampant increase of cancer. We don't want to go back again and now we start, blaming the government that probably people are dying because of the importation of the GMO. So I think our public participation is key. The government also need to come out clear and tell us the reason that they were informed by the policy makers and the cabinet and the researchers that now I think GMO is healthy and it is good for our country. Why they have lifted the ban after 10 years. So there should be a conversation that we should be having as a country.
Okay. Yes, no.
Today I'm a happy person because finally I was a bit worried. Finally, Cherargei has remembered that he's a senator. We were worried that he has turned into a blogger, but now at least now he's working. You see, at the end of the day, what Raila is talking about is that he's telling the National Assembly they need to realize that they're representatives of the people. That is why I bring this home. You see, there are those who believe that just because you're in Kenya Kwanza, you can't advise the government when it's doing something that is wrong or seen to be wrong. Now, the questions on GMO, you see, they rush to import this maize. They rush to uplift the ban. The question is, who gains from all this? Why is the government in such a rush? All right? What are the long-term effects? Because you have to look at the scientific risk assessment, all right, because of the health issues. Also, you look at public participation, for example.
There's that argument of food security and that Kenyans, because of the drought, are starving, and so it is paramount to make sure that Kenyans have the food as soon as possible.
Their problem is that they promised a bag of flour for 70 shillings. That is what they're after. That is their problem. And you see, cheap is always going to be expensive if you don't do the right things. At the end of the day, the question is public participation. There are those who feel they wouldn't want to consume GMO. You see, in developed worlds, when you go to shop, you see GMO-free and GMO products. What if I don't want to consume GMO products? And you have flooded the market with GMO products. That in itself is wrong because I haven't consented to using GMO products.
But I think there is a proposal that you can make a choice as a consumer.
But now the problem is, once this market is flooded, for example, with GMO, what happens to it? Because you see, like he just said, there is that argument or there is that narrative that we have been consuming, all right? Which in itself, if it is true, that is an illegality. You get? So at the end of the day, it brings us home to matters of public participation. Why is, you see, the comments from the Minister for Trade, very reckless comments, and pedestrian in a way of, I think he was late to try out his coming up of a stand-up comedian, which is too late for him now, I guess. But at the end of the day, you look at, for example, the issues surrounding the secrecy. Because who gains? That is the question. Because multinationals are the ones who are pushing for this. And that is why you see Raila is saying this government is more or less a puppet. A puppet of who? That is a question. So at the end of the day, issues of GMO need to be addressed holistically. And members of parliament, now I see they are kind of awake because it will affect the farmers. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, the plan that you gave to Kenyans talked about how you're going to help the farmers. So if this now comes and does exactly opposite to what your manifesto is talking about, then how are you going to implement the same plan that we expect the promises in that plan at the end of the day? So there are serious questions that need to be addressed. And we hope that they will be addressed, because if not, the other question is what happens to our trading partners in East Africa community? Will they agree to trade with us if we flood our market with GMO products? If they are still anti-GMO? Because you have to look at this thing holistically in a broad prospect. Because if I'm not saying it is there, but if there's someone who's getting a 10% somewhere, then that is the problem. You get?
I think it is not correct for you to assume that probably someone is getting 10% of what is being imported. It would be actually unfair for us to discuss towards that direction. But I think we should not lose the focus in terms of, is it the most viable idea? And the reason why probably the government has been able to make that decision, because I don't think they're making a decision out of a pedestrian way of thinking. Probably there is what has informed the government decision. And what we are asking is make it public for us to understand the reason why you want us to deal now with GMO. Because if there is no any health hazard in regards to the GMO, and probably because also they want to make sure that they balance between whatever the farmers are importing or whatever the farmers are producing and whatever we can be able to sustain as a country, because that's also making the cost of living a bit expensive. So I think it is a decision that, or it's a discussion that we should have, all of us. If the government make it, see it prudent for them to make it public, whatever informed them to make that decision, I think maybe probably to be one way or the other, we'll be able to buy the idea. But we should not go and import and go to a direction of GMOs blindly without knowing. And it is also because that we want to make sure that the cost of living, we have been able to reduce the cost of living, or probably because we're not able to produce enough, so that you decide that, we're going to give these people poison, because at the end of the day, we want to bring, want to make their cost of living, achievable. I don't think that is a government position, but I think probably it is because they want to ensure that you have enough, especially for the common mwananchi and the people down there. If they can be able to label, this is GMO, this is not GMO, so as a consumer, you decide which direction you're going to take. If only you can be able to afford to go for GMOs and that is what you're affording, it is okay.
But you must agree, it's not black and white. And
it's not black and white.
I mean, there's so many gray areas when it comes to this whole issue of GMO, and I think that's why Kenyans are a bit concerned. Nordin, do you want to respond to that? Then we'll get to Javas. You give us your last word, right? Okay. Very good.
I actually hope that members of parliament will actually come together, this issue of GMO, because they are our representatives. They should come together the same way they come together. It has to do with CDF and car grants, so they actually represent the people better. Because I believe there are a lot of gray areas in this GMO, and this reminds me of back in the day we used to have those China phones that the Kibaki administration banned, that flooded the government, which the market, because they were cheap. And there was this joke that you would walk with one under a transformer. If it was empty, it becomes battery full. That's a joke for another day. But at the end of the day, we need to look at, that's why I say cheap is expensive. If the only rationale for importing is so that you can be able to realize a 70 shillings bag that you promised, if that is a rationale, that is a wrong way of moving. So we need to look at a holistic conversation on how we actually educate the people, because they don't know. They don't even understand what this thing is. And the farmers more so. You see, the farmers are the ones who actually we depend on. They actually need to understand what the GMO seeds are.
So there's a lot to be discussed.
There's a lot to discuss.
Thanks, Nordin. Let me get to you, Javas, in a moment, but we do have some breaking news right now. Yesterday, we covered the story of a building in Ruiru town where there was an emergency evacuation there in Kiambu County. Now that building has just collapsed. So thank God, a stitch in time, more than 50 households were able to evacuate that house and were able to find shelter outside that apartment. There were shops downstairs and there were different apartments, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartments in about, I believe more than 50 apartments that were located there. So you can talk about almost 150 people that were living right inside there, at least 150 to 200 people. So we do say thank you, God, for the people who managed to evacuate that premise there. So it was very bad. I was there on ground yesterday, and the cracks were quite evident of a quite dangerous place to be in. And of course, we will be getting more stories and just getting more updates on exactly what is happening on the ground right there. It is right opposite the police station, Ruiru town. All right, so we'll get more details on the same. But Javas, you have the last word on this GMO issue and what way forward.
Fools always rush in where angels fear to tread. We must not aspire to be food secure and by doing so become health insecure. And so we must be quite conscious and judicious in our decision to embrace GMO fully, when even across Africa, countries are shying away from GMOs. South Africa, I think, is the only leading African country that has made critical advances in GMOs, followed now by Kenya by this effort. You see that MPs even from Rift Valley are saying that buy from the farmers first, then now import the GMOs. Why are they speaking with water in the mouth? Is it just a question of procuring the maize from the farmers, then after that they are okay with importation of GMOs? You see, when you look at the 2012 regulations by NBA on GMOs, provides even for the labeling of all GMO products, so that the consumer can make a conscious decision and choice whether they want to purchase this or the other. And so we need to get to that point where consumers, even though they have the choice, the government must move to protect consumers in this country. We saw Bill Gates in this country the other day, and we know very well that he's one of the brains behind some of these efforts. We know that Monsanto is in this country, and we know that they're behind the GMO.
Right.
The issue must not just be about trade and business in this country. The issue is the future of Kenya guaranteed? When you look at the World Health Organization report on health of 2020, provides that here in Kenya alone, 7,000 people, women actually got cancer, and 50% of them died. That is 2020. Now with the influx potential of GMO in this country, to what extent are we going to see a scale-up of cancerous infections? Because we know from various research that has been done on various animals that GMO has got a great inclination to lead to, as a causal route for cancers, various kinds of cancers. So various institutions in this country, from National Biotechnology Authority, KEFIS, all research entities, but especially Cabinet. This government of the people, by the people, and with the people must move to defend and protect not just the Constitution, but the people, much more than business interests.
And indeed, it will be certainly quite interesting to see where this debate will take us, at least in the next couple of days and weeks, and what decisions the government will perhaps make with regard to this. Well, but thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming in this morning. Javas Bigambo, political communication strategist, lawyer, as well as governance expert. We did have Mheshimiwa John Juguna for the first time here on M Live. Kiamba, Member of Parliament. Karibu Tena once again. And of course, Nurdin Kagai, advocate and political analyst. We will be keeping tabs with that development in Ruiru town in Kiambu County with regard to that building that has just collapsed. We did report on that yesterday evening, on that emergency evacuation of more than 50 families in that area. We'll be getting back on ground to hear exactly what happened, when that happened, and of course what way forward. Remember, the Kiambu governor was on site yesterday and he made a number of statements with regard to those who might be held culpable for those buildings that we've seen collapse. Remember, about 5 people have died in just a span of 2 weeks, one in Ruaka and in Kasarani here in Nairobi. All right, so this is where we end, but Your World is coming up in a moment. Winnie Lubembe will be taking us through that, and also very interesting, you're on television, because television is really important. Today, by the way, is World Television Day, to entertain, to inform, and of course to educate, and I think that's what we've been doing here this morning. My name is Zenobi. Smile, have yourself a good morning and good week.